Hi, this is Matt Robertson from Rocky Mountain Roping. And now that you've got your swing down, you know how to feed your rope, you know which rope to buy. I did a video on heading dummies. Now this is a video on what heeling dummies to buy and how to keep it as inexpensive as possible. So heeling dummies, there's different variations of this dummy right here. This is one of the old original, they call it the pipes from Smarty. It doesn't move, it's locked in. You can unhook it here and there. Makes it pretty easy to take with you wherever you go. This dummy here, a little bit more expensive. You can build one of these if you're a welder, or you can buy the updated version of the pipes, which is pretty cool. It's got more realistic legs. Heel-O-Matic has one as well that looks pretty neat. There's a handful of them out there. You know, I like a dummy to have a little bit of something soft here so it's a little bit easier on your rope, like a little bit of carpet. And that way you can see where your top strand's hitting. You know, sometimes if you hit up high like here with your top strand, it'll slide down. So it's nice to have something with a little bit of carpet on it. I don't have that anymore because I barely rope these dummies. I rope the dummy off the horse, which we'll get into in a later video. But to get started, you need to rope the dummy on the ground, work on your swing, work on your delivery. And then once you get really good at that, then you can go to, when you start roping on a horse, then you want to take the feel from the horse that catches to this dummy, just to warm your shoulder up or do whatever if you're at a jackpot or rodeo and just, you know, fooling around. You know, a couple years ago, I pro rodeoed in Montana, and I would rope the dummy, you know, 20, 30 times before every run because I wanted to get a feel for feel every strand of my rope and feel my bottom strand coming down. And I'll do a video on how I prepare, you know, as a pro roping the dummy versus, you know, a low number roper trying to learn to rope the dummy for the first time. I'm not sure what these cost. I'm going to say they probably cost anywhere from, you know, $150 to maybe $500 depending on what kind of a dummy you want to get and how fancy you want to get. I would recommend you get something pretty cheap to start out with just to see what you like. Now, this is the old sawhorse. I think they call it the burro at Home Depot. They'll have this. You can build these if you're handy, but these are pretty cheap. I think I bought this maybe 4 years ago for $39. So I imagine they're probably worth, you know, $50 to $60 now. It seems like everything's doubled in the last 5 years. But pretty cheap, pretty easy. It doesn't fold up. Here, we're making a video here, buddy. Go take your ball somewhere else. Yeah, go that way. He loves playing fetch. That's old Roper. He's quite the dog. So anyway, this dummy here, this is what I rope. It's easy. I can put it in the back of my truck. I can put some bales in between here if I got it in the back. You know, this one does fold up a little bit nicer and neater. And I think the Heel-O-Matic one is really easy to fold up as well. But this is pretty nice and pretty easy. Now, if you're roping on dirt, you got to have some grit. It's something that's not super smooth like cement to rope the dummy on. If you rope on hard cement, your bottom strand is just going to bounce and hit through and do lots of weird stuff. So if you're roping at your garage in town on cement, I would recommend you get one of these green mats that you see people have in front of their RVs and fake grass. I think it's called something turf. But anyway, I bought this. This is I think it's a 6 by 8 foot piece of AstroTurf at Home Depot, and I think I got it for 40 bucks. And it was the cheapest one they had. And then, you know, that's fine. It might break down and then you throw it away. Or you get a fancier, nicer one, you can get carpet, whatever your money allows you to do. But it's nice to have something like this if you're going to be in the city on cement And then also if you don't want to, if you want your ropes to last a little bit longer and not get hitting on that gravel that's kind of like sandpaper, this will make your ropes last a little bit longer too. So now I'm going to show you kind of the nice thing about these dummies. There's different ways you can set up these dummies. You can have it on the ground like this, or you can have it like this. Now, having your dummy just set like this, one thing I don't like about this is see how the angle of this is going back? So if your top strand hits, once again, it's just going to fall down. You're not going to really see where your top strand hits. Also, you can bring your bottom strand back a little too far when it's like this and get away with a loop, and then your loop would actually collapse. So I like to have my dummy off the ground. Now you'll see some dummies, they'll have it off the ground like this. Now when you do that, it makes it even more likely for your top strand to fall down, and you can't really tell where your top strand is hitting and what it's doing. So what I like to do is hang it like this, to where this is more at a 90-degree angle from the ground, and then when my top strand hits, I know exactly it's more likely to stay there versus collapse and fall down. The other thing that this does is it makes you plant your bottom strand out a little farther in front of the feet. Now we'll get into that in another video, in the roping video. But basically, when you place your bottom strand farther in front of the feet, then you don't have to rope cattle out of the air. And you know, if you're just a catcher who really works on getting in time and always throwing perfectly in time and always getting cattle that are handled really nice, that are hopping really nice all the time, then being a guy that ropes cattle out of the air is fine. But if you're going to be a rodeo heeler or an NFR heeler that can rope those draggers and them steers that wash out and do all those wild, crazy handles, you got to learn to set your bottom strand farther in front and then wait for it to jump into it. We call that the soaker. You know, roping one out of the air is so much fun, and it feels great, and it's so satisfying to watch. But that big heel shot that comes in there and hits and soaks, and then you let them jump into it, those are the ones that can really catch those bad handles and draggers and trotters and steers that already have a foot on the ground. So it's a little bit more forgiving to place your bottom strand more out in front. And it's actually a little bit harder to do. For me, it's harder. I tend to try to rope cattle out of the air, and that's easy for me, but it's hard for me to just set that big, nice loop and then wait for them to soak and jump into it. And that's probably one of the reasons why, you know, I only made the NFR once and I'm not a world champion, to be honest. And I'm being brutally honest with myself. And I want you to learn from my mistakes so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So what you do, place that dummy there, and then you take your, you know, real expensive twine here, and I mean that sarcastically, and you find a little place you can loop that in, and then you just, you know, find a way to, I just tie a little square knot or something not super fancy, and boom, we've got our dummy set where it's a little bit more straight up and down, and it's off the ground. Now some guys like to teach with the dummy on the ground because then you can't pull that bottom strand all the way through. But I like to have it off the ground so I know exactly if my bottom's hitting and staying out front or if I'm pulling it through. And those are two different types of loops that work effectively. And you know, basically if you're winning the world and kicking everybody's ass and you're doing it a different way, then keep doing it your way. But if you want to learn the differences between getting better and the differences between like number 6 heelers, 4 heelers, and number 10 heelers, you know, I'm going to show you what I've observed and the differences that I've seen, and then you can compare yourself and try to diagnose yourself on what you might need to do to get to that next level. So yeah, that's basically how I would rope the dummy. You know, before a big roping, before a jackpot, I like to loosen up my shoulder and rope the dummy. A lot of pros are very good at just pulling their rope out of the rope bag and going and winning. But me personally, I've got to rope the dummy, loosen up my shoulder, get a feel for my tip, get a feel for opening my loop, try to get a feel for every inch of my rope. And I mean, even, you know, Tiger Woods had to hit a few range balls before he went on. And then you got John Daly, I guess, who doesn't. And you know, I'm more of a Tiger Woods than a John Daly, so I've got to warm up, and I don't care if it looks stupid, I don't care if people laugh at me. If it works for me and I can warm up on the heeling dummy, then I'll do that. One of my favorite, one of my favorite, alarm's going off. One of my favorite stories that I was roping with Travis Tryon at Laughlin, Nevada, and I'm roping the dummy quite a bit before before we rope. And then I remember when I roped the steer, I threw fast and I threw it in kind of high, and then I had to, let it lay there a little longer, let him jump into it with both feet, and we won the round. But I was still kind of mad that I didn't throw a very good loop, and I knew I kind of got lucky right there. So immediately I went back to the trailer, and I'm sitting there roping the dummy, working on throwing that bottom strand down a little harder. And this, multi-NFR, this guy made the NFR at least 10 times. He comes around the corner, he's seen me, he scampers off, and I see him kind of take off. I'm like, oh, he must have forgot something. Then he comes back and he's dragging his team roping partner. He brings him back over to me, and he says, hey, this is what we need to start to do if we're going to beat this kid. So, he was making fun of me, but he was also being real and being funny with the truth. And I just kind of laughed. It's like, hey man, I got to do what I got to win. So anyway, do what you got to do. What might help you might not help the next person. This is just me helping you with what helps me. And there's lots of different ways to rope a steer. When we get into heeling, it's going to get very controversial. There's so many different ways to heel 2 feet and catch. And I'm going to try to be as open-minded and try to help you out as much as possible. So now you're ready for your first heel lesson. Let's get into it.